Each one of you that I said hi to today, thank you so much for being kind to me. And each one of you said to me, oh, you're the one that does yoga. I'm like, yeah, that's me, I do yoga. So I would just like to know, with a show of hands, who here has done yoga? Wow, that's awesome. And if you haven't done yoga, you probably know someone who's done yoga, right? So those of us that love yoga and do yoga, we are freaks about yoga. You probably know that. You've probably heard people tell you like how awesome yoga is, and then when we try to explain it, it gets complicated. So I'm going to talk today about yoga and why I think that yoga is an amazing vehicle for helping us to find our truth of who we are, and an amazing vehicle for healing. I'm going to start with a quote. So the quote is attributed to Plato, and the quote is, "Be kind, for every person you meet is fighting some sort of battle." I think that quote is very yogic, and I also think that quote is very relevant for us today. Everyone you meet is fighting some sort of battle. And this battle is invisible. And this battle has been talked about quite a bit today in the talks. But the battle is about who we are and honoring the truth of who we are. Seems like that would be an easy thing to do. But come to find out, to honor the truth of who we are to stand up here or anywhere and be yourself, be fully yourself, is a really complicated thing to do. So one thing is we get a lot of messages from society that we are not good enough. We get messages about our body. You're not thin enough. You're not tall enough. You're not muscular enough. We get messages about how rich we are or how smart we should be. So all of these messages we start to absorb. And as we absorb them, we start to believe them. We start to believe that our truth should be what we see and the messages that we receive. Our mind also plays quite a role here in our truth. Scientists have actually proven that our minds will grasp on to the negative over the positive. So they can actually study this and prove this. So an example of this, I'm going to give a light example, but an example of this was, and this is true, just the other day, I saw a friend of mine who I haven't seen in a long time. And we saw each other and we hugged and we kissed, and she said to me, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. I miss you. I've been thinking about you." And that was great, right? I felt really good and really loved, and we had this connection. And then one thing you should know is that recently I just cut my hair. I've had really long hair for many years, and I decided to try this sort of anti-normative beauty look of short hair because I feel like that's who I am right now. I want to have short hair. And she said, "I almost didn't recognize you, though, because you cut your hair short." And then I was like, "Well, do you like it?" You know? And she was truthful. She said, "Yeah, I like it, but I really missed your long hair. I liked your long hair." Okay. So we said goodbye, and I went home that night. And interestingly enough, when I recalled our time together, the first thing I recalled was, she didn't like my hair. Should I have cut my hair? Maybe I should grow my hair long again. Like, that's pretty shallow, right? So here I had this meeting with an old friend, and where my mind chose to go was maybe I should change my hair. Maybe I did the wrong thing. So this is just a very shallow example or a superficial example of how our mind attaches to the negative. But I think probably all of you can relate how we do that. The other thing about our mind, what the mind does, is that we think the same thoughts, some version of the same thoughts, 70% of the time. It's crazy. 70% of the time, our thoughts are the same. So if you combine this with our mind attaching to the negative, what's happening in our internal world is pretty potent, it's pretty toxic. So to be inside with ourselves can be pretty scary. So when you have this internal battle that's going on, one of the things that we tend to do is we want to escape, right? So being with ourselves, being with the nothing, being with the silence, is these voices saying that you're not good enough or attaching to the negative. And so we try to escape it. And we do that by trying to look outside of ourselves for soothing and for comfort. So maybe we look outside to food, or we look outside to drugs or alcohol, or even like always having to be in a relationship, always having to be busy. Maybe it's electronics or being on, connected, texting, Facebook. So we're always out there. And what happens is we're not in here. Yoga, the yogis, they recognized that all of us were suffering. So this is the battle that I'm talking about. We all have this internal battle. And they took this idea of suffering and getting free from suffering in this lifetime as a very serious thing. They created a whole system on how we can get free from our suffering. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting some sort of battle. Everyone is fighting some battle. When we think that we are the only ones that have an internal battle going on, we are creating another layer of suffering. So we're getting even more complicated. So I think it's really important to have that understanding that we're all more similar than different in that respect. I love this quote by Plato that he says, "Be kind." And kindness has definitely been talked about today, that connectedness. And I think for myself, the understanding of being kind to others comes pretty easily. So I get that, and I hope that I'm kind, and I try to be kind. But the understanding of being kind to myself, that's a lot more advanced. That's a lot, that has a lot more complexity or challenge for me, and I don't think that I'm alone. And so I'm gonna tell a story, and it's actually how I came to yoga. So one thing that I just want to put out there is that when I was in high school, I developed a body image disorder, and I developed an eating disorder. And the way it manifested for me was that I became obsessed with my body, and it was never good enough. And all of my thoughts were pretty much around that. And I kind of thought that was normal, and I just tried to go about my life like that. And when I was 30 years old, I was married, still married, happily married. I had just had a baby. We had just bought a house, and everything on the outside looked really good, right? So if you were to meet me then, you would say, wow, she's got a really great life. And I did. But the other thing to complicate the story was that I had recently lost 100 pounds. So then you would say, wow, that's great, hard work, you lost 100 pounds, and that it did take hard work to lose the 100 pounds. But what happened in the process of losing the 100 pounds is that my body image stuff that had started in high school got kicked up into gear like 150%. So now I had this amazing life, but I wasn't even fully experiencing it because every other thought I had was about my body, and I couldn't stop it. And I wanted to stop it. I didn't want to be obsessing on my body. That's all I could think about was exercise, dieting, food, would I gain my weight back, will I lose more weight, whatever, you name it. My crazy mind was going there. So I ended up in a yoga class. And it's quite amazing, actually, that I ended up in a yoga class because at that time, I thought exercise should be to burn calories, right? And so yoga is not about burning calories, although it probably does do that a little bit, but yoga is about stretching, relaxing, unwinding. That's how I knew it to be. So I'm in this class, and I actually had to go to the yoga class more than once. So the first time I went, I'm not going to say that any bells and whistles went off. I just, it was nice. I felt good afterwards. It was great. But I think it was around the second or the third time that I was in this yoga class. The teacher was instructing us to breathe in this pose. So the pose that I was in, it's not a hard pose, like anybody could do it, but it's physically demanding. So you have to use your muscles, and you get tired in your legs while you're doing it. It's called bridge pose. So I'm on my back, and I'm up in bridge pose, and the teacher's saying to breathe, so I'm trying to do what the teacher says. So I'm doing this big breath, and then the teacher says to feel. So I'm feeling in my body, I'm feeling what's working. And then I think probably the teacher was quiet, and I was just doing the yoga. And when I came out of the pose, what happened was amazing. I realized that for the first time in a long, long time, I was in my body, I was present, and I hadn't thought about my body, and I hadn't thought about weight, and I hadn't thought about all that stuff that was torturing me. It had completely disappeared. And instead of this self-hatred or this I'm not good enough messages, there was really nothing, but it was good. It was really good. So when I came out of that pose, I burst into tears. So here I am bursting into tears. Nobody knew, but I was crying. But I knew instinctively that whatever just happened, I needed to know more about that. I totally needed to know more about that. So fast forward 18 years later, that's today. I'm a yoga teacher. I have a yoga studio. I actually teach others how to teach yoga. So I'm going to say that I won that battle of my mind telling me that I'm not good enough, and I won the battle of the body image. Now, is this to say that yoga has completely eliminated my thoughts about food and body? No way. No way. That's still there. That's still part of who I am. But what yoga has helped me to do is learn how to free myself from suffering from it. Has helped me to learn how to recognize the voices when they come up, right? To recognize the self-talk, and has given me skills to work through that. So I think that's pretty powerful. I believe that one of the amazing things about yoga and why there's 20 million people right now, 20 million people in the United States are doing yoga right now, that we do that, is why we're doing it, why it's so effective, is because it's done in the body. So I want to talk a little bit about this. So like I said before, the brain has its own agenda, right? The brain's agenda is to keep us safe, right? Everything that happens, we react to, is this safe, is this not safe? So that's what the brain does. It dices and slices every situation. And that's important. We need that, obviously, stay alive. So that's the brain's function. But when the brain is in charge, the rest of us is not in charge. And I just want to talk about other parts of us that actually feel and intuit the world, okay? So like talking about the heart. So just simply operating from a place of the heart. The heart is very different than the brain, right? So the heart is compassionate, and the heart is open, or maybe it's closed, but the heart is vulnerable. So if we were to make decisions that involve the heart, it would be very different than decisions that involve the brain. And then another part of the body that also is very intuitive and we don't often think about is our center, is our belly, is our guts. So our belly is actually the place where we digest food. But not only do we digest food here, we digest situations, right? This is where we get gut responses. I mean, that's follow your gut, trust your gut. Like, that comes from reality. Our gut does have intuitive ability. So if we were to always react from our center, it would be very different than reacting from our brain. And then another part of the body just to consider is our legs, okay? So our legs are what ground us, right? It's what's connected to the earth. So when you actually are in a situation and you ground into your legs and you feel your legs, that will keep you centered as opposed to being all up here in your head. Okay, so right before I went to give this talk and I was over there, I grounded in my legs because I didn't want to be like all up here and nervous and scared. So my legs helped to keep me here and centered. So that's what yoga does, is yoga brings us into our body so that our brain is not the only place within us that's in charge. And the other thing that yoga does is yoga puts us in charge, right? So when we're looking at how do I change, how do I get truthful to who I am, how do I help heal myself, yoga has you do it yourself. That doesn't mean that you don't have allies and you don't get help as you need to, but it's another tool. And it's a tool where you're in charge. And you go underneath the surface, or you go deeper than just the intellectual level, and you start to work with yourself. And so that way, there's no magic crystal or magic ball or guru who's out there telling you how you heal yourself, or how you change yourself, or how you become yourself, how you become your true self. You do that work yourself. And I think that's fascinating and exciting, as opposed to trying to listen to someone else and take someone else's advice, that we have our own ability to heal. So be kind. For everyone you meet is fighting some sort of battle. Thank you.